So when the regulators stepped in, what does that all mean? So the interesting thing is that the regulators don't just close up the business, they take control of the business. And in the banking, you'll see out there on the door, there's a little gold sticker that says FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corp, insured. So that is each account or each account owner is insured for up to $250,000. So if something like this happens, FDIC comes in and gives everybody $250. $42 billion, $250 per customers. There's a gap. Well, the regulators usually come in trying to sell assets, pull assets together, and find ways that they can, make the individuals at the bank whole. So they zoomed in to do this. So Friday morning, you have the trading was halted, regulators are in there, and all of the talk shifts. So now we've had this 48-hour news cycle of all the things I mentioned that just happened. General Atlantic obviously backed out. They were unable to issue the stock, unable to sell the bank. All plans crash along with the bank's stock price, and they say, freeze. And the regulators are in place. What now? So now this is where, the first lesson here. When you're in the middle of a crisis, the best thing to do is communicate with transparency to your key stakeholders. So if you've got a crisis going on at your company and you've got 3 or 4 customers that depend on you, don't let the rumor get there before your voice does. There's BizDoc learning number 1. Don't let the rumor get to their ears ahead of your voice. SVB, the general sentiment. Here comes a quote. The general sentiment was that SVB did a poor job communicating to us, the clients, when announced Wednesday to be raising that money from General Atlantic. While also it was unloading holdings in the background, which constituted our deposits. Bad word, bad word, bad word. He says, I couldn't believe that they were announcing this and then saying they were raising money at the same time. So they're saying things in public, and we have to be one of their top 20 referring partners, in other words, referring startups of all time. So suddenly it triggered my memories of Lehman Brothers, who smiled at us and act similarly, saying everything was okay. Lehman Brothers is one of the ones that crashed and died in 2008. So listen to what that VC is saying. He was begging for exactly that kind of phone call. And what if they had called and said, hey, look, we put a lot of deposits into bonds. The bond market, we're at a gap because interest rates have gone up so quick from the Fed. We have a little loss. We need to sell and then cover the loss with a small issuance of stock. Are you in? And by the way, everything's cool. The rest of the balance sheet looks this way. They could have those kind of conversations with their key customers. Instead, the customers started circulating. They said customers started circulating phone calls amongst themselves, trying to find out what each other's perspective was and what each other understood about it. And so they repeated the Lehman mistake. You would think that in the financial services industry, especially Silicon Valley, that they of all people would be incredibly familiar with the Lehman Brothers and the Bear Stearns errors and not repeat it. But nonetheless, that's what happened. So here you go. Friday comes to a close. The bank has been seized, and things are starting to happen on Saturday morning. There's contagion fears. And there's a gentleman well-known in the venture capital circles, incredibly successful entrepreneur, Jason Calacanis, and he posts a video at First Republic Bank in Southern California of a pretty good line of people on a Saturday morning that are sitting there taking a look, inside the bank, going in there. And First Republic, remember, is one of the other regional type banks, and it serves a lot of tech companies, venture capital companies, and the wine industry, very big in Central California. And a lot of people made a lot of money in venture capital, also invested in wineries. Things kind of go together. And so he's publishing this video to Twitter, and people are going, oh my goodness. Now that's a truthful post, but there's a lot of things that went along with it, and people were getting nervous. Meanwhile, the regulators and folks are out there telling everybody, we have a process going where we want bids by the end of Sunday for Silicon Valley Bank. So what was going on there? People saying, why are they doing this on the weekend? They wanted to see if they could find a buyer and announce it to say, hey, we've stepped in, done our regulator job, we've got someone willing to buy it, and we're going to sort through this before the stock markets open on Monday and before banks reopen on Monday, so that people wouldn't get into a frenzy and make runs on other regional banks that had nothing wrong with them but would not be able to handle it if $1 billion of withdrawal requests show up at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. So the regulators and everybody involved are saying, this weekend we are working 24/7. And so that's where it went. And we started seeing, if you and me were paying attention to news over the weekends of this, they're out there trying to get that. They're trying to do it. Meanwhile, a very interesting story swoops in, because there is speculation that maybe up to 93% of the deposits were uninsured. You know, the 250,000 from FDIC, that 93% were uninsured, but there was also a rumor that what the regulators and the Fed were going to try to do was see if they could get, and Janet Yellen, seeing if they could get people the FDIC money on Monday and then 30 to 50% by the end of the week, so that the startups can make payroll and they could do things and have access to their funds. So while that was happening, there was a story that came out that I was kind of skeptical of the story, but I want to share it with you so you can see how fast things were moving over the weekend, but more importantly, how fast the financial services industry moves with and against each other when it hits the fan. So the story broke in the information, and I saw it one other place, that said Jeffries was armed with an authorization of $500 to $1 billion to call the startups and say, hey, you have a deposit claim against SVB. What do you have? $5 million. I will give you 70% of that right now in exchange for the claim. Here's the bet. I give you $3.5 million, 70% of $5 million. They put it in a new bank. They lose $1.5 million, but at least they get something. And then Jeffries sits there and hopes that when everything is sorted out, then when they sell Silicon Valley Bank and they figure out what they're going to do, that they are going to be able to get more than $3.5 million from a combination of FDIC and maybe government bailouts. Remember, this is the same industry in 2008, at the end of The Big Short, there was a bailout. There was a bailout. So perhaps that's what they were singing. But you see how that works? Where they say, you have a claim against the bank, but time is your enemy. I'll give you 70% of your claim right now, but if I can collect the whole $5 million, I get it. What you get is a 3.5, and then we're done. But if you really need it and time is your enemy, take it. And so that's what the information reported, is that Jeffries was offering 70 cents on the dollars for deposit claims. And there was a couple other organizations that were mentioned in there. And, you know, I made a phone call to one of them with a highly ranked guy in distressed debt. And he said, listen, don't believe everything you see in the papers right now. There's a lot of wheels turning behind the scenes. But I thought that thing was pretty interesting, what was going on there.